I grew up in a small town and I love that lifestyle where Main Street looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. Everybody knew your name, but I watched our movie theater close. I watched our grocery store close. My school eventually closed. And I assumed the only way I would be able to have a successful career was to move out of state. My sister moved to Texas, my brother moved to California, and I moved just a couple counties over to coal country. Coal gave me the American dream that I never thought I'd have.
When my great-grandparents and a grandfather that immigrated to the United States, ended up in Arthur, North Dakota, they started the grain elevator there in 1906. There was no electricity in Arthur in 1906. They bought a generator and started using electricity to run the grain elevator, but also selling the spare power to the community. And so as a young child, I actually remember my dad, going out in blizzards along with other guys from the elevator to try to make sure power lines were up, to make sure electricity could get to the folks that had dairy cattle and other folks that were there. And so, rural electrification really allowed North Dakota to become North Dakota.
If you think about it, from charging our phones to having stoplights working at major intersections, to turning on your lights, turning on your furnaces, medical procedures, critical care medical procedures, that is all about electricity. None of that could have been achieved without electricity, without it being readily available and affordable. It's one of those things that it's like taking it for granted. It is a truly amazing human endeavor that it is a part of our fabric of our society that no one really truly grasps. And without it, where would we be today?
When I came to North Dakota, took this job, started visiting the coal mines and power plants, I was blown away. Now remember, I'd worked in the energy industry for 10 years, but until I saw it, it was hard to grasp the magnitude of what the coal industry is capable of doing. I was blown away by the scale of the mines, the scale of the equipment, the scale of what they're doing, taking tons and tons of material out of the earth every day, converting it into electricity. But then even though I knew it, I intellectually understood that they were doing this reclamation process. I was still blown away by how quickly and how well they did it. It's amazing to walk down through the mines and see the coal being pulled out of the ground on one hand, and then not very many miles away, the earth returned to a great state of environmental remediation.
Most of us grew up in this rural area. We grew up on farms and ranches. Many of us still farm and ranch on the side. And so we're mining and reclaiming our homes. We truly care about putting those environmental controls in place because we know that the people that we're affecting most with how we handle the environment are ourselves, because we're reclaiming the land that we one day expect to turn over to our children that we hope will live here too.
But we try to take it an extra step beyond that, is put the land back together better than the way we found it. And truly our legacy is going to be the fact that when this is all, coal mining is all done, you're not even going to know we were there. And that's really our legacy.
So North Dakota is the number 6th energy producer of all the 50 states in the country across all sources, and yet we're always near the top and having the cleanest air and the cleanest water. And so that combination of us being able to be a strong energy producer and do it in such an environmentally sensitive way is really unique.
One of my favorite tricks is when you bring somebody to a coal mine, get them in a pickup, drive across the mine site on a dirt road and stop right in the middle of the road and say, we have mined on one side of this road and we have not mined on the other side of the road. You tell me which one. And I would guess more than half of the time they get it wrong. Because what they'll see on one side of the road is a stream that's pretty badly eroded. It's not staying in its banks. There's some flood areas. And they will say, well, that's where you've mined. And I say, no, in fact, it's the other side where we've mined, because the stream's in its banks, everything's as it should be. It's full of native grasses, you don't have a lot of invasive species in there, and it just looks so much better. And people are always amazed, right? They can't believe that we had actually mined through this area and put it back, as we say, better than it was before.
We have a stricter standard for our reclaimed land than anywhere else in the nation. We have to return 100% productivity back. And that's because we know that in order to maintain our status as a powerhouse in agriculture and still be able to export cost-effective power, we have to be able to efficiently mine coal and then completely, fully reclaim that land, return it to agricultural status so it can go back into that agricultural productivity.
Economic impact begins at about $5.7 billion. That's just a big round number that we throw out because it captures, I think, the importance of the industry to the state. But you break that up a little bit and think about what it really means. You're starting with hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenue to the state, tax revenue to the counties. That supports state government services, county government services, schools. But incorporated into that $5.7 billion, it's also money to families directly employed by the industry. It's businesses that are supported by those employees. It's the gas station in coal counties. It's the restaurants in Bismarck. All of those things are supported by contributions from the lignite industry.
You know, lignite, I think we definitely take it for granted sometimes on what it does for us. I know I do, and I work in the industry. It's pretty incredible what it takes to get that from energy source to generation to your home. And so, yeah, I have a lot of pride in the industry. I think that what we do is important. It's important for the quality of life of us up here in North Dakota, especially where it isn't always 70 degrees and sunny. You know, it's can be pretty harsh up here in this country. So having reliable electricity is absolutely essential, and really from a safety perspective essential as well.
In addition to just being a great supporter of our communities and good paying jobs that the lignite industry provides to many of my students and their families across North Dakota, the lignite industry also contributes to every school in the state of North Dakota.
So the mineral assets of the state have a significant impact on education within the state of North Dakota. We are able to fund education in ways other states across this nation are not able to, and that's a direct relationship to the mineral estate that the state manages. In the past 10 years, the coal industry has contributed nearly $30 million to the Common Schools Trust Fund, which again then goes directly back to paying for K-12 education within the state.
Beulah is a lifestyle. I mean, it's a wonderful place to live, good community, good people. The plants and the mines all bring stability to the city of Beulah. It allows the city of Beulah to do things that a town this size normally wouldn't be able to do, just because of the people that live here, the incomes that are provided, families. Allows us to have a very good school system. It allows, you know, all aspects of the city of Beulah to stay on an even level playing field. We don't have the ups and downs like you have if just agriculture or in other types of industry.
Ag is a big deal in North Dakota. It is a big deal in Beulah. And we do have some manufacturing things that come around the area here, but our heart and soul, a lot of what happens around Beulah for support comes from the plants.
I think reliability cannot be discounted. And I think it's a growing concern as more new generation resources, essentially renewables, are coming online. People want to know that when they turn on the light switch that they're going to have power, whether it's the middle of the night when the sun isn't shining or on a hot day when the wind isn't blowing. So reliability and affordability are incredibly important, and renewables are still an untested technology in terms of how you back up that power supply on a continuous basis. There are a lot of questions that have to be answered, both from an economic and reliability standpoint, and that's incredibly important.
As we know, some people have painted a very bleak future for coal-fired power plants in our country, and I think that's a very dangerous thing to do. As of right now, if we just go to wind and solar, we don't have enough power, especially in places in North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Montana, where winters can get brutally cold.
People in the Dakotas and northern Minnesota saw wind chills plummet to -50. In Minneapolis, police spent the day handing out gloves in sub-zero temperatures.
So essentially, it's just a big storm, if you will, that's usually in the Arctic in the upper levels of the atmosphere, but unfortunately it has traveled all the way south into the United States, and we're seeing some of the coldest air we've ever seen.
In Augusta, Georgia, where the high today reached 48 with some light rain.
WOWT in Omaha, where temperatures tonight are expected to plunge to near record levels of 16 degrees below zero.
Here in Fargo, North Dakota, I gotta tell you, the air temperature is real close to 30 below zero right now.
So the polar vortex here in Minnesota was a very scary period. It was really touch and go at some points, whether or not we could produce enough energy with everything that was being consumed. It was a wake-up call to all of the energy producers. It was something that we really need to pay attention to, and as we add more wind and solar and even biomass onto our grid, we need to really be mindful that those things don't always produce energy in a situation like the polar vortex.
They expected a certain amount of the renewable generation, largely wind, to be available on a certain day last January, and it didn't work because the temperatures got too cold and the wind farms didn't produce as they were expected. They basically shut down because they were too cold. So they were short a significant amount of electricity. Fortunately, there was enough resources that were available to turn on in short notice to fill the need. But those are situations that really underscore the importance of a diverse fuel source and diverse electricity generation.
Baseload energy is energy that fundamentally operates kind of regardless. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it is the foundation for the system, generally from something that operates and is not subject to intermittency. So intermittent are just resources that really don't have the capacity to run all the time. Maybe they're physically not designed to do so. Maybe they're based off of a resource like wind, which even in North Dakota is maybe 45%, maybe 50% of the time on some of the farms that you see proposed today. So the grid, while resilient and while you can have multiple assets continuing to push in the grid, always kind of fundamentally needs baseload energy to provide the inertia to allow the system to work.
Currently we have long-term contracts and investments into our existing coal-fired plants. If we were forced to shut those plants down and forced to find a new power supply, the electricity rates to our members will go up significantly.
Today, on the domestic energy front, we have about 10%, give or take, of our total energy needs being met by renewables. Another 10% or so is provided by nuclear power. The other 80% is powered by fossil fuels. So replacing that 80% of our energy that today comes from fossil fuels would require not only a tremendous investment, but tremendous amount of redundancy because of the intermittent nature of some of those renewables. We need to, for instance, if it were wind power and we needed 500 megawatts of incremental power in a particular market, we would probably need to build closer to 2,000 megawatts of power and store at those times when we're actually producing that capability so that we could have a steady and reliable 500 megawatts available to the grid. So essentially we're going to be looking at a triple or a quadruple capital investment for capacity if we want that capacity to be available at all times.
This is the only product in the world that's generated, transmitted, stored, and consumed in the same instant. So this is not like a regular market where when you start to run low on something, you just ration for a little bit and then somebody will come back and fill up the bucket. I mean, this all happens instantaneously for the most part, and so that adds to the complexity. When people start saying we can do all these things differently to the utility system, it's not a system or it's not a market that looks like any other market that you have in any other product in the world.
Over the years, coal-fired plants in North Dakota have done a tremendous amount of work to get cleaner and cleaner every year. And I think it's important to remember that plants every year are continuing to better their processes so that their emissions become less.
People want a lower carbon environment. The way you do that is by developing and deploying the technology. And it's got to not only work, the company has to be able to afford it. You can't regulate your way there. Even if that worked in the United States, which as we've seen it doesn't, you can't regulate China or some other country. But if you develop the technology, deploy it, and get it to the point of commercial viability, then others will adopt it, and that's how you solve the challenge.
This industry has changed a lot. I've been working in this industry for over 20 years. And being able to evolve with it and watch it evolve has been truly exciting. And what I'm really intrigued by is what else can we make out of coal?
So if you look at, for example, rare earth minerals that we want to use to advance technology, whether it's in a solar space or in our phone space or in an electrical space or in a wind turbine space, but huge amounts of the batteries and other opportunities, huge amounts of technology advancements are based upon newer metals or newer elements from the ground today, most of which all come from foreign countries. So 90% of the rare earth minerals that the U.S. uses today come from foreign countries, some of which obviously are not friendly to us. So as we continue to figure out how do we use these assets better, they end up ultimately having multiple benefits and multiple purposes.
So what we've done is taken those attributes of lignite that may have recently been viewed as maybe a disadvantage, not being very energy dense, and turned them into advantages by saying, what can we make out of lignite coal that's valuable, that is easier to make out of lignite than out of natural gas or other types of coal? And those are things like plastics, like fertilizers, like graphene, carbon fibers, rare earth elements. And that's going to play a significant role in the future of the lignite industry. That's where the lignite industry in North Dakota maybe differs from some other places. We've dedicated ourselves to answering the question, what do you do with CO2? With the answer, something useful. And we think that regardless of where you are on that spectrum of people and the debate regarding CO2 and global warming, that answer ought to satisfy you, because we're among the first in the world that are actually doing something about it.
Carbon capture is the process by which we capture carbon dioxide from a point source, such as a coal-fired power plant. We separate it out of the emissions from the coal-fired process. So in a coal-fired power plant, for example, it's a little more than 10% of the emissions from the coal-fired power plant are carbon dioxide. And what we will do is we will use a chemical or physical process to separate the carbon dioxide from the rest of the gas. At which time we can do a number of things, including compress that carbon dioxide and store it deep underground where it's safely and permanently stored. Utilize it for enhanced oil recovery, where again it's safely and permanently stored but at the same time producing hydrocarbons, or utilize it for some other beneficial use.
Every effort has to continue to be made to help people understand that just like sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, and mercury used to be big problems, but through research and development and investment, those problems were solved. Now the emissions of CO2 is a problem, and yet people need to understand that the CO2, while it's a problem if emitted into the atmosphere, it's also a valuable resource if captured and used appropriately. And we can do that, and that opens the track to, as I've said, to a bright future for coal, a bright future for our energy grid, and a bright future for America.
And I always approach these things not as through a political lens, but approaching it through an economic lens, because if we can solve the problem, if we say, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and we can solve it through R&D in the most economic way, then that's when consumers win. And that's when the environment wins, we all win.
All the things that we're talking about go into that. Not only producing energy in a way that's consistent, dependable, high quality, cost effective, but doing it right. having the right kind of regulatory environment where you make sure you do things right and well, but you also empower the investment so you can continue to provide that energy dependably and cost effectively, but with the best environmental stewardship.
So we have created a situation where we are now controlling our energy interests. We're looking at supplying the world with our energy. And I think the people that are out there talking about not producing energy at some point are going to recognize the value of reliable energy, whether it be from lignite coal, whether it be a abundance of energy from oil and gas, and the mix of renewables. We have to have it all. We have to continue to do it all. We have to work together, energy sector to energy sector, to continue to provide that affordable energy and reliable energy to our citizens.
Certainly in North Dakota, we have very strong resources, some of the best in the world. We have coal, we have hydro, we have wind, and we have oil and gas, and we are a unique place in the country and an energy powerhouse. And so with those cooperative relationships, we can lift all boats with the energy that we've been blessed with. And certainly our community and our friends and family that live in Minnesota are beneficiaries of those resources as well.
We work in an industry that we need to come to work. It doesn't matter if it's snowing or if it's raining or if it's 100 degrees or negative 30 below. We have to come to work to supply coal to the power plants so they can produce power and the end of the line customers can actually use it. It feels pretty good to be a part of a job in an industry that does that.
You can spend your energy looking for a reason to dislike it, or you can dig into the truth and you can see how much is being reinvested and recycled and repurposed within the industry. You can see how efficient it can become, how efficient it is, and how much more efficient it can become. It really opened my eyes to get out there and see it firsthand and realize that this is, there are incredible jobs. There are families that have dedicated their entire lives to seeing this industry grow, that they're proud of their work. It's a labor of love. And if they felt at all that this was gonna create a more toxic or negative world for their kids, that they would have walked away from this years ago. But they see the potential and they see what it does for their families, for their communities, for our state, and for our region, that they double down and they really wear that pride on their shoulder.
If we have the R&D done in the United States on how to deliver a carbon-reduced, carbon-free, very stable product, we could be exporting that technology. So instead of shutting down an industry, we should be investing in that industry. That's what we're doing here in North Dakota, is investing in the R&D, because we make energy cleaner, better, and more efficient in the United States than anywhere else in the world. And so again, credit to all the men and women involved in all phases of this industry to be able to produce an all-of-the-above strategy that serves millions of people in such a low-cost, highly efficient way, and do it in a way that's so environmentally sensitive.
So when I started out here as a summer co-op student, I went out and collected baseline data and documented what was out here before we mined it. But then I also got to see that land go through the process. So environmental controls put in place, coal uncovered and removed, the land reclaimed, and now I can go out and stand on a spot where 20 years I collected data and cattle are grazing just like they did before we mined it. But I also remember what it looked like when the dragline sat in that same spot. And to be able to remember that whole timeline, to be able to know I was part of it, it's a pretty amazing thing.